Welcome back everyone to the Railroad Challenge. And since the last episode, I cleared out the space I will be needing for the central depot. And this side all looks straightforward. It is the southern side that looks a bit sketchy because that means it will have to be over the water. But I do have ways of incorporating into that because I could have quadrants on what's inside the depot for waiting pastures and the like, and I could put a fishing area here. I could have, of course, the food court in another area. And I'll have some furnaces in another area for processing all the good items and maybe a rest area in the fourth. So therefore, there could be 4 areas in there for things to do in the station while waiting for your trains. I'll probably also have to make some sort of a spur that goes to the freight area so so the workers can safely go to and from the mines without being molested. But that's something additional on top of the railroad itself. And I've also started the process of taking down some of these dunes, which has given me quite a surplus of sand and some sandstone, which is fortunate because we had a little bit of a disaster. Actually, that's the setting sun. Sets north, not south. Oh well. But in any case, this is the site where the first intermediate stop is going to be located. There had been some contention as to where to build the rail line, and of course the mining company wanted to build it where we have it right now. Others had been wanting to build the line a little bit closer to where the village was, since that was in a direct line between where the mines are up in the hills up there and where the nearest village was located. And the mining company was saying that the ground in that region wasn't particularly stable, as expressed by this little location right here. And if you look over here, you'll see there's spaces where we have nothing but sand overhanging, and it's just a disaster waiting to happen. In this case, though, it also turns out that a spur of that ravine is right under this village. And when I arrived here, I noted that this house had settled down and its door was blocked. So I agreed to excavate this area so that the door will now be accessible. That seemed like a nice thing to do. And when I did so, I uncovered that there was a cave under here, and much of the sand that was on here collapsed inside. I shored everything up and put in some sandstone in order to make things firm for a while, but this looks like a temporary solution, not a permanent solution. It's not a good idea to have no foundation. Thank you. It is a good idea to have a more solid foundation than a bunch of sand. So therefore, after some negotiations with the villagers, they have agreed to move the village if the new site that I built for them is right next to the rail line. So therefore I need to build a new village down there and move everyone across there Though I will need to at least build a temporary road across here so that when they move across, we don't all collapse this and throw them into the underworld. Another part of this agreement is that we build the western line first. If you recall last time, I was planning on building the western line last because it was desert and seemed to be the most boring and uninteresting of the directions. I know I only surveyed 2 directions so far, so that was a pretty small sample set, but one was going to go over a savanna and the other one had those hills to go over, those extreme hills, so therefore it was pretty certain then that they were going to be interesting no matter what. This was the most boring one, and I figured, okay, we could save this for last. But our contract is to help save this village before a bigger disaster happens. So that is what we are going to do. And my first stage to this is going to be building a road, a safe road that leads from the old village up to the new village, and that can be traversed by the various citizens of the village. And of course I'm going to have to build incentives for them to roam across to connect one from the other. So first thing I'll do is build a road, then I'll start building some houses over here where the villagers can live, and move the buildings one by one. And some of the later houses I could just raid parts of this, use them for here, and hopefully the villagers will start moving across. I probably have to build some intermediate locations and all that fun stuff to induce them to. But in my experience, villagers are want to move into some sorts of weird areas, so they may start moving no matter what. At first, we need to start building a road. If we're going to be able to give them a secure way to get across, we will need some trees. And this being a desert, I don't see many of those in the area. And we don't have a convenient spruce forest nearby. Fortunately, we saw last time that inside the smithy we have all these oak saplings. And they are going to be used to create our trees, because these trees belong to the village, the road's going to belong to the village, so therefore we should be able to use them without too much trouble. Now let me be careful here so that nothing really nasty happens. But we'll toss one tree here. We'll toss a tree there. So I'm going to grow a few trees. Now, unfortunately, I've been going through shovels through an alarming rate so far. And we have here a toolsmith that's willing to sell me an efficiency 3, silk touch, unbreaking 3 iron shovel for 6 emeralds. Now I have to have mined 6 emeralds from the mines over there, so I think I'll do that. That's my first villager trade. Let's see what he unlocks after this. 7 iron for an emerald. Well, obviously I can't do that one, considering that I need iron. Iron is... and 11 emeralds for an efficiency 3 pickaxe. Well, I doubt that's gonna be very helpful. But that's a good source to get shovels. Now, it does mean getting more emeralds, but I will have to find some way to it. I'll probably have to assume that they will pay me in emeralds for some of the stuff I'm doing. Now you're saying, how are they going to pay me for a civil engineering job in emeralds? And, alright, that will mean that they'll pay me in food and I'll use the food to trade to the farmer for the emeralds. It still works. The real trick is figuring out exactly where to put the village. At first I was thinking of just moving it right around here in this surrounding area at approximately the same size as the old village. The trouble is, if I put it there and just against the railroad, I found that it was still going over places like that. So we still had some very, very dangerous locations to deal with. And as I was probing through here, much of the area where I was thinking of building the road collapsed. So we have a very dangerous area. So I think things are beginning to get to a safer location where we're starting to see some sandstone and then later some stone. So I think that past this point I will be able to build a road, and that road can go down this way. Now I've been leveling some of this with sand, and I went through 2 unbreaking 3 shovels. Yes, that took care of all of my string just about and all of my emeralds. So I'm probably gonna have to make that spider farm I was talking about probably in a earlier episode. Actually, the problem is I have the cave spider farms in 2 different series, so it's trying to remember, okay, which one did I talk about? What? But I do have a cave spider spawner, so perhaps maybe I could use that as a string farm, though I really don't like using cave spiders farms, but that's an entirely different matter. Now, I was thinking of putting the village down here, and the reason down here is, of course, water. I presume that the old one was because it was near a little bit of water and had a good well, so therefore, good place to put one. Maybe when they founded the village, this river didn't exist or something, because rivers aren't exactly the most stable entities in deserts. With the coming of the rail line, they'll have a steady source of supply even if something does happen to the river. So I'm thinking we'll put the village down here along the river, and it'll actually cross the line, straddle the line. So I will take this down. But then the question is, what about the railroad? The railroad, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it to come all the way down here, because that will be just too much shoveling to do. So most likely, the line will be around this height, and will be about this height on the other end. So therefore, I will build pillars here, and I'll have it as an elevated line going through here. So therefore, the village will be right under the train line. And in fact, I'll probably have a couple of stone buildings right in the middle, and the rail carts will go right on top of it. And fortunately for them, this is I was about to say a daytime only line. How true is that? For passenger, of course, it will be daytime only. But the mining carts might do some night travel in here. They'll probably have to have rules on the night travel in here that only in the early night, because most of the coal of the carts for the iron and coal that are being mined will probably come down here, go down in that direction, all during the nighttime. but they could pass here during the early night and then, of course, continue traveling on. And the late evening stuff will be after it passes the village, so that the sleep time on the village won't be disturbed too much. So you will, of course, during the daytime have trains coming by. It'll be like living in Queens. It's back when I lived in Queens. We did it. I lived pretty close to an elevated. I'm trying to think of what you call it. Anyway, New York City Transit area. I was going to say elevated subway, but that's a contradiction in terms because obviously it would be technically a subway if it's elevated. But of course, it fed into the New York City subway system, but in many parts of Queens, it was still an elevated system. So it could be similar to that, where you'd have the elevated trains going through, and I pity anyone who lived right next to it. I was a block away from it, so I could still probably have heard them back then, but that was a long time ago. But as you can see, I'll just have this travel across here, go to the other side, and then we could have some buildings there. Now, I'll also need some bridges so they could get to and from wherever they're going. And I think it would be a nice little community for these people and a lot safer because we won't have all that undermining. I hope there won't be all that undermining there. So let's build them a nice, safe community. Make sure that there are exactly 9 doors there because a 10th door might push it too close to siege level, and I want to avoid that. Anything where there'll be a subway car or anything like that. So I think it's time for me to start building this thing, and I need to come up with designs for buildings, and maybe I could make them a little bit prettier than the ones you've got over here because, yeah. I'm sure that green could give you a big list of faults on the architectural style that's being used in this desert village. Of course, that's probably not saying much, as green could probably come up with a long list of faults for my designs. I haven't started on the village yet, but I am building the road that's going to be connecting the village to the old village to the new village. And the idea here is to have a mob safe path to go around here. Try to see if I could also fence in the village itself. The idea is to make sure that the villagers, when they do start wandering towards there, when I start trying to get them to move across, and possibly I may wind up creating a train line to do this, to help encourage them to move around, I want to make sure they don't go wandering outside into the unsafe parts of the desert. So I built a sandstone road and put some oak fences on either side of it. Now I took a survey of the buildings in the town, and if I understand things right, we've got 2 libraries, 4 small houses, 2 large houses, a smithy, a church, a well, and 3 sets of fields. Now I'll probably combine the 2 libraries into being a single larger library. I think that would be reasonable. So we could consolidate the library, maybe have a couple of extra houses so they could be nice and comfortable there. We'll obviously still need a church and a smithy, so those are important things to have. And of course, fields. Fields are going to be very important, and I decided to use the natural ground area here in order to get a little bit more wood, because I'm going through quite a bit of wood building this fencing because I want to make sure the village is nice and secure before I start building here, because once I start building here, as soon as any of those guys start to detect that there are doors over here, they may start moving, and of course we don't want them going into the wrong locations. Therefore, between episodes, I will finish up on the fenced out area, try to make things safe for them, and when we return next time, we will start to have a look at some nice designs for homes for these villagers where they could be able to live and thrive. But that'll be for the next episode of the Pine Leaf Railroad Challenge.